Researcher at the Afro-Middle East Centre, AMEC, a research institute based in Johannesburg, South Africa. He joins us in studio as this latest Middle East issue unfolds. Ebrahim, thank you so much for joining us. Now, this is unexpected. There's been a lot of speculation about it. How is Trump's action affecting conflicts in the Middle East on a broader scale? We've seen reaction, we've seen protests at US embassies, and already there's been killings.
I think when we look at the Trump decision, one is, as you said, it was coming. It will have an impact, and it is having an impact because Jerusalem, aside from the fact that this move is an illegal move, that it already shows or puts the last nail into the two-state solution, this move Jerusalem is a very important place for both Palestinians and Muslims alike. And so we will see a unification of Palestinian civil society. We're also seeing an intensification, or in rhetoric, in oppositional rhetoric towards the U.S. So we're seeing, the culmination or the fruition of these new alliances. It's very significant that Trump, prior to making the decision, informed the Saudis, informed the Emiratis, and so we're seeing this concretization or the calcification of these two different blocks, now the resistance axis and the moderate axis, and Trump's decision just basically calcifies these blocks.
Now, resolution after resolution by the United Nations has stressed the need to pursue a two-state peace solution. Is Trump's action a violation of these?
I think, in looking at the two-state solution, we've seen settlements expand. There's now roughly 600,000-700,000 settlers living in East Jerusalem and the West Bank since Oslo. And so a two-state solution is already dormant in a sense. But this does put the nail into this solution, because as part of the solution, East Jerusalem would have been a Palestinian capital. But Trump's move signifies, or at least supports the Israeli view that Jerusalem and the whole of Jerusalem will be the eternal capital. And it's unlikely that any Palestinian leader would be able to support such a move without a serious backlash.
Why do you think Donald Trump has made such a move and such a decision, and also referring to his predecessors by saying that they have failed in their peace efforts in the past? And he's come out and made a final decision, just fulfilling one of the promises he made during his campaign trail for the U.S. presidency. Why do you think now he's made that move?
I think there's three reasons. The first reason is he needs some successes. The attempts to rail back or to end Obamacare is failing. Tax reform is slowing down. Also, many of his donors are very right-wing, pro-Israeli or evangelical Christian. And so that's another issue. And also his advisors, Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, all of them have been or have previously been accused of supporting settlement expansion in West Jerusalem, in Jerusalem and the West Bank. And so these three factors culminate in the fact in a move that shows the American bias. And and that's why we're seeing this opposition, because it's a realization, or at least it's the formalization of this American bias.
Trump's actions, some have come out and basically saying that they've condemned it, firstly, and saying that it's a violation of international law and the UN Charter. Does this make the UN helpless?
It shows. I mean, this conflict has been going on for roughly now 70 years, since 1947. It's 70 years since 1947. It's 100 years since the Balfour Declaration. And the UN, an institution, every year has resolutions calling for the two-state solution that are supported by, 180 of its members and opposed by 5. Yet, the settlements continue to expand. The Israeli, the occupation continues to become more entrenched. And so the UN has become an institution that is powerless. And specifically because of the US's veto and its willingness to use this veto. It's used this veto to, on many occasions to actually protect Israel and ensure that no sanctions, are faced by Israel for its expansion or continued expansion.
Ebrahim, 70 years since the General Assembly Resolution 181 was adopted, and a sovereign and independent state of Palestine has yet to emerge alongside the state of Israel. Is Trump's action not a challenge to this resolution?
I think yes, it is, but also, UN Resolution 181 called for Jerusalem to be an international city. So it wasn't supposed to be, on either side. It wasn't supposed to be controlled by either side. Also, we saw, we have since seen an expansion of settlements. So, UN Resolution 1981, Israel controlled, I think, 55% of the territory of Mandate Palestine, and Palestine was given 45%. The number now is like 80% to 20%. So, that itself has meant that, practically and on the ground, or what the Israelis like to call facts on the ground. From that perspective, the solution has been over a long time ago. And, this step just, further puts another nail in this coffin. And, it is hoped that maybe we'll start looking for, or, the international community would start looking for different solutions, ones that look more at equal rights rather than two different nations and two different states.
And then in the same breath, you have Arab countries that have pushed for a speedy two-state solution between Israel and Palestine. Some have improving relations with the United States. How does this action by US President Donald Trump affect those relationships going forward?
I think most of these countries that are calling for normalization of ties with Israel, such as Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, have really good relations with the U.S. And their relations have been improving under Trump. And so when we're looking at the current scenario, we actually seen Trump forming this coalition with your Saudi Arabia, with your Emiratis, and we see their positions on Israel changing. Many in the Saudi media just prior to the decision said that we need to look at the Israeli conflict differently. So we're seeing the fact that these alliances or these states that formerly called or supported Palestinian rights are actually becoming more into the U.S. ambit and are actually becoming closer and having closer relations with Israel, which at the end of the day is actually ensuring that a two-state solution is not possible and will not be enforceable.
When you say a two-state solution is not possible and is not enforceable, just take us through the thought process there, because there's been calls. The policy and UN law has always been in support of a two-state solution, and it's taken many years. Now, this move by US President Donald Trump making a decision against everyone's wants, or the UN, and seeing the reaction from the UN and a lot of countries coming out and condemning the action by US President Donald Trump. Do you think it is viable, a two-state solution?
I think when we look at a two-state solution, we need to look at practicalities. We can't have a Palestinian state which is not contiguous. The land is not continuous between the state. That's the first issue, and that's mainly a result of the expansion of settlements since Oslo. There's roughly 6 to 7 billion Palestinian refugees that were supposed to be part of this two-state solution, which doesn't make it able. Now, one of the contentious issues was what will be the capital of these two states. It was supposed to be East Jerusalem for Palestine, West Jerusalem for Israel. That now, has been thrown into doubt because of Trump's decision. And so this means that, this two-state solution is on paper and only on paper. In reality, it's actually a one-state solution. We're seeing the expansion of the Israeli occupation, the entrenchment of the occupation, and so this two-state solution is just actually an excuse to ensure that the international community doesn't do more to sanction Israel for its continued violations.
Talk to us about the fact that, or the argument that US President Donald Trump seeks to bring Arab states and Israel together in a strategic alliance against Iran and extremism. Do you think this is going to work, and do you think there's a possibility of an alliance coming together?
We see this alliance already being formed. We're seeing closer ties between Israel and Gulf states, specifically Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. Mohammed bin Salman, the deputy crown prince, or the crown prince now, visited Israel in September. And so, you know, many of these Arab states have formed this alliance, or are forming this, or, you know, willing participants in this alliance, specifically because they view Trump as being able to provide them support against Iran. And in the case of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman sees the Trump administration as allowing it or enabling him to consolidate his control over the Saudi monarchy. And so we are seeing this alliance form. And I think what this alliance is actually meaning is that, you know, it's actually ensuring that, you know, ordinary citizens of these countries are actually, you know, their freedoms are being cracked down, and it's actually, you know, ensuring that this disillusionment grows. And once this disillusionment grows, it's likely that, you know, we will see more militant type actions because of this growing disillusionment.
Ebrahim, we've seen the reaction from the people on the streets, you know, the protest action that has taken place, the violence that is currently taking place. Let's go back to what the argument by ordinary Israeli, the Jewish community in particular, that this is Jerusalem is their archaeological and historical capital in any given circumstance. Your take on this?
I think we need to. I mean, we can talk about religious dimensions, but you know, if we're looking at religious dimensions, we don't look at the political nature of the conflict. Zionism as a concept only came about in 1900s, in the late 1897. You know, with Theodor Herzl's The State of the Jewish People, and so this idea or these ideas of an Israeli state, you know, in biblical Palestine, was only then, you know, put into more practicality. And so, yes, you know, we can talk about religious linkages. I mean, there is religious linkages. Jerusalem is holy to Jews, Muslims, and Christians. And so that's why we need to look at the political solution. A political solution that would allow all three religions, all three groupings to have equal rights and equal, you know, responsibilities in the state. The two-state solution initially was seen as being able to do this specifically because Jerusalem, under that, you know, under UN Resolution 181, was going to be an internationally controlled city, not under the control of the Israelis or the Palestinians. But, you know, Israel's acts has meant that that solution wasn't, you know, practical, you know, especially after 1967 when it occupied East Jerusalem. And this move, just basically by the US, which is currently the most powerful, you know, powerful military and economic power, holds a UN Security Council veto, basically formalizes Israeli demands and Israeli control over Jerusalem. And it means that a solution, you know, that, yes, you know, we can talk about the religious aspect, but that it means that the solution that would allow for all these three groupings or these three, you know, monotheistic religions to have equal rights and responsibilities in the city is impossible. And this is what, you know, this is why, you know, Jerusalem being viewed or being associated as an eternal capital of Israel, and not the Jewish people, just Israel, is actually a situation which is impractical and actually undermines the rights of the other religious groupings who have equal claim to, you know, the holy city.
Expectation, there's a council meeting, UN council meeting that is going to take place where this is going to be discussed, you know, and what is going to be done going forward. What do you think is the best possible scenario with regards to the issues in that Middle East region?
I think what we need to look at is we need to start moving away from this two different nations idea and towards an idea of equal rights, equal responsibilities, and maybe something along the lines of a South African solution, you know. However, I think that, you know, as you said, the two-state solution has become so entrenched, or at least the two-state mindset has become so entrenched that it's going to be virtually impossible, you know, for it to be reversed, especially since, you know, even within the region, your Saudi Arabia, your Emirates are actually into the idea of normalizing ties with Israel. And so I think, you know, we're going to see a UN Security Council meeting, or even, we may just see a condemnation. We're seeing other states basically re-endorse their positions of keeping their embassies in Tel Aviv, calling, basically talking about the two-state solution. This does mean very little, however, on the ground, because Israeli settlement expansion continues. We talk about the violence that's happened today, where we saw, Palestinians protesting, but we saw live ammo being fired by Israeli soldiers, resulting in the deaths of a number of Palestinians. So this, if this occupation continues, rhetoric and UN, UN resolutions mean very little unless there's an enforcement mechanism to try and ensure, accountability. And this is not happening because of the veto power of the US in the Security Council.
Now, are we likely to see maybe other powers also getting involved and with that veto, and maybe another big power with a veto coming into play? Or is this going to be a situation where we'll just accept that the US has made a decision and we move forward from that? You mentioned the fact that the occupation is now, the scales have tipped, and it's possibly between 80 to 20%, which is a very high number. And when it started, it was about 55 to 45%.
Yeah, I think, yes, there's, all the other states, and yes, many of them are, are very sympathetic towards the Israeli position. But it's been the US veto that has meant that, there's been no accountability. And so even if China, for example, said, just issued a statement today saying that East Jerusalem should be the capital of the Palestinian people. The UK basically issued its dissatisfaction, or stated its dissatisfaction with Trump. Another veto holding power. France said the same. But because there's no accountability, there's no enforcement mechanism, basically the Israelis have been allowed to continue and expand their control over Jerusalem. We saw, for example, there's no Palestinian state. And the idea of a Palestinian state, even under Obama, was going to veto this Palestinian state. So there is no two states if there is no Palestinian state, and no enforcement and accountability for Israeli occupation. And until this changes, which is likely, can only be a result of UN Security Council reform, this is likely to continue, and the consequences, for both the dire consequences for both Palestinians and Israelis, is likely to intensify.
Ebrahim, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to leave it there for now. That was Ebrahim Deen, a senior researcher at the Afro-Middle East Centre, AMEC, and he a research institute based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and he was joining us live in studio.